Chapter 2. Naughty Young Man. When the white single-cab pickup pulled into the diner parking lot, Henry figured he might pick up some extra business. After all, it was not a truck he recognized, and most of his customers were predictable locals. Then, when it swung around and pointed its way out, he guessed they were just looking for a bathroom. Most eaters pulled straight into the parking lot in front of the building. People not staying long tended to point their vehicles out. It wasn't uncommon to see. State Highway 160 was one of but a handful of roads that crossed through the mountains, taking travelers both north and south. Highway 141, that merged with it right in the middle of town, took travelers east and west along the Rio Grande. Neither was a main road, just two-lane blacktops, but they still saw their fair share of traffic. He watched as three men climbed out and looked around. They talked for a second, and then two of them started for. The other leaned against the truck and fired up a smoke. Yep, he reasoned, a bathroom pit stop. Henry, a black man now in his late 50s, had run this small diner for more than 30 years. It wasn't a great living, but it paid the bills. It was even paying for his daughter to go to a community college a few towns east. In his glory days, he was a football player on a scholarship at the University of Colorado, Boulder, a heavy-set lineman looking at a future in the NFL. But a blown knee sidelined him. After a brief stint as a spokesman for a local car dealership, he eventually started this place. He was still heavy-set, but muscle had turned into softer things. His once handsome, chiseled face had been replaced by a receding hairline and laugh lines around his eyes. Henry finished wiping down the counter as the two strangers entered. To his surprise, both sat down on padded stools, looking as if they might stay a while. He smiled at them and dropped two menus down in front. "Can I get you boys something to drink while you look over the menu?" Both men looked pretty young, maybe in their mid-20s. Both white. Both were dressed in jeans and T-shirts. The taller blonde-haired one was wearing a vintage military jacket. The shorter one had his head shaved and was sporting a lightweight leather jacket. It's kind of warm for coats, but in the mountains it did get cool when the sun dropped down, so it didn't seem that out of place. Weren't many of the younger crowd running around in wool caps in the summer? At least their pants weren't down around their knees. Henry hated that with a passion. The taller one spoke up. "We're just going to be a few minutes. We're meeting someone. I'll take a Mountain Dew if you got one, though." "Same," the other said. He ran his hand across the top of his smooth head as he spun around on the stool swivel to gaze out the windows behind him. "No problem," Henry replied. He quickly filled their orders and returned to prepping for the evening dinner rush. The two strangers chatted quietly with each other while he worked, leaning against the bar and facing the windows and parking lot. He largely ignored them while he worked, filling fry baskets with frozen fries and stacking up dishes for filling next to the stove. He paid only enough attention to them in order to monitor the level of liquids in their glasses should they need a refill. Good tips were the product of good service, after all. The third stranger stayed in the parking lot, firing up yet another smoke right after finishing the first. That is when Henry noticed the license plate. He couldn't quite make out the state from so far away, but he could clearly read the rest. Porsche Lover was stenciled across the surface. Now, who in the world puts a custom plate declaring their love for a German sports car on the back of a Chevy truck, he wondered. The familiar red Wrangler of DJ swung in and stopped alongside the road. He watched as DJ dismounted and walked over to shake the stranger's hand. So that's who they were meeting, Henry mused. For a minute, he thought there would be a confrontation when DJ made to walk around the other, and the stranger stepped in front of him to block his path. Apparently, the other two at the counter thought the same. They both stood up, started for the door, but then hesitated. Henry reached under the counter and laid one hand lightly on the baseball bat he kept stashed there. 3 against 1 was not exactly an even match, and he was not going to let anything happen to one of his best customers. He saw DJ produce an envelope from behind his back, and then everything returned to being friendly. Henry relaxed and pulled his hand away from the bat. He stole a glance at the two strangers now standing at the windows. They didn't seem to relax at all. In fact, they seemed wound tighter than springs. Something was wrong. He didn't like how this was beginning to look. Once more, he placed his hand on the baseball bat, and turned his attention back to the parking lot. That is when DJ, out of the blue, punched the other guy right in the kisser. The stranger flew backwards against the open tailgate, almost collapsing into the bed of the truck. He recovered somewhat, but then began to stagger sideways across the parking lot. DJ was in hot pursuit, with his hands balled into fists and preparing to hit him yet again. Both of the strangers inside exploded towards the door, with the shaved-headed guy leading the way. Henry grabbed the bat and started hauling his large frame over the counter, yelling at them to stop as he went. He momentarily focused his attention on the floor as he came across to make sure he landed good. After all, he wasn't a young man anymore. When he looked back up, he was staring into the barrel of a shiny, chromed-out revolver aimed at his face.